This is the Krillcast. I am Chris.
And I'm Andrew.
And it is our 11th printed and pressed podcast about what type of media, Andrew?
Books. And today we're covering which one, Chris?
The Fourth Turning. Boo, boo, boo.
Which is by William Strauss and Neil Howe.
I will pour out a cold one for Mr. William Strauss.
Yes,
He's no longer with us, but there is a new book coming from Neil Howe called
The Fourth Turning is Here, right? I forget exactly the new title.
It's called The Fourth Turning is Here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one.
That comes out on the 18th. So
we're covering this book today, and shortly after the other book comes out, we'll be covering that one.
Yes. This is the refresh everyone who's ever read the first book should want to see before they go and read the new one, if you don't feel like reading it again like we did.
Yes, it's a refresh and also a discussion. So
yeah, because you and I both really love this book. So
I really enjoyed it. I think there's definitely some pieces of it that I may disagree with, but we'll get to that as we go through it.
That's hindsight, though.
It is. I agree.
Yeah.
We have the hindsight to look back now
Yep.
and be like, yeah, some of this stuff, not so much. But at the same time, they got quite a bit right, and we're going to go over all of it as much as we can in the time we have anyway.
And they also include a lot of context that maybe they weren't able to really piece together at the time, but they have all the information that could explain some of the hindsight things that they just missed, you know?
Right. So why don't we get started? Why we already explained the why we picked the book. So now it's time to talk about the book.
Yeah.
And the best way to start that off, I think, is to look at this chart, which is kind of the main focus of the book.
Right. So, I mean, as you can see in the chart, it has 4 archetypes in history for this. His generations come in 4 archetypes, according to their analysis. You have heroes, artists, prophets, and nomads. And when you see this chart, they have each generation mapped out according to each archetype. And there's only one. Well, there's one cycle where it was kind of screwed up, and that was basically the Civil War cycle. Yeah. And there was no hero generation for that specific era.
And that has caused other issues down the line, because when you skip 1/4 of what they call the saculum, which is the 80-year repeating historical kind of mirror of each other, that can affect generations to come. And I think we're kind of starting to feel the effects of that. But keep going on your description.
Well, we should get into the saculum and everything. Basically, the century.
Should we define saculum first?
Yeah, you define that for us, Chris.
Well, a saculum is essentially the span of years you can expect for a given lifetime, or the generation of a lifetime. So, for example, if I was born in the year 2000, a saculum for me specifically would probably last till 2080.
Yeah, I mean, typically it's a long human life, right? And historically that has never changed. Humans have not evolved to have longer.
Well, you know, I do need to correct myself on that, though. So the saculum is a rotating piece of history, according to the way they describe it. Like, there's seasons in a year.
Yeah.
So you've got, you start the year with winter, spring, summer, fall. Or you could, if you want to call it spring, summer, fall, winter, however you want to handle that. But basically, depending on what season you're born in, your lifespan will occur throughout 4 seasons, which make up the saculum, 4 generations of 20 years. And depending on where you're at in that saculum, you may experience a different generation from the outset being right in front of you. For example, if you're born during the hero season, or the hero part of the saculum, then the generation right above you would be the artist, and above them the prophet, above them the nomad.
Artist is after the hero, Chris. They have this.
I said above, as in they're older than you.
They're not right above. Nomad is just above heroes. They have the.
Oh no, I'm sorry. The artist would be dying off. The artist is the old people dying off. You're right. I'm sorry. I did it backwards. So it'd be, before you'd be the nomad. Before that would be the prophet, and then in our case, the artist is the silent generation.
Yeah, well, it's also supposed to be Gen Z, but we have thoughts on that.
Sorry about that.
No, the issue that you ran into is you're used to it being in order, typically with the prophets in front. And in this specific chart, they go with how heroes started the very first seculum. That's how it originally started to begin with, because there was a crisis which ended up with heroes founding new kingdoms and stuff, and then that's how you end up going through the whole new secular human experience, I guess is how to phrase that. But the key is it is a long human life for a reason, and that is by the time the children turn 80, everybody who was alive for the last crisis has died, basically, or their influence has died off completely. And now you're being run by people who are not alive to see the last metaphorical winter. You're low on how you built the civilization, so they don't really appreciate the foundation that was built and why things run the way they do. So by the time 80 years is gone, then you now are ready for the next big crisis to happen because no one knows the lessons of the past.
Right.
And I guess we should just describe each archetype. You have heroes who, as you can guess, they're the hero. They come in and they're the soldiers who basically fight the war. You fight the war that against the big enemy that you're trying to overcome and start this new government, this new high, so to speak, of civilization. So you got the GIs, you got the revolutionaries, right?
Is that chart helping with you right now, or should I pull that one away for now?
Just go back to the previous one because we had the generations listed on it. But
sorry about that.
So, previous hero generations. Currently, the millennials are supposed to be a hero generation. I'm conflicted on that myself still, just based on what you see millennials behave like. But before that, it was the GI generation. During the Civil War, there was no hero generation, which explains a lot about how that cycle went down. Before that, you had the Republican generation, which was Thomas Jefferson and everybody who basically fought the American Revolution. And then there were previous ones before that, which are more associated with England than us. The artist, how would you describe the artist, Chris?
The artist, you're saying like, how do I describe it myself or based on the book?
I mean, based on the book, wouldn't you say that they're the expert class? I say in quotes because they kind of think of themselves a little bit more highly than I think is warranted.
There we go.
But I would say that they're the expert class because you never have people more credentialed than in the artist.
Well, wouldn't it be accurate to say, let me look at this one real quick, that the
compassionate.
So the fourth turning would be the millennials right now. So you're talking the artist generation. Is that what we're on right now? Is artist?
Yeah, we're describing the artists.
They come up during the first turning, which is high, with strong families, loosening child nurture, maximum gap in gender roles. Like they're living in a very ideal, a settled ideal culture that is considered innocent, maximum continuity, all that good stuff. So vision of the future is brightening. So yeah, I would agree with you. I think that they would be what you would call an expert that didn't have to live through the crisis. They're born during or after the crisis, generally speaking.
Yeah, I mean, they're described in the other table as children. When they're in young adulthood, they're kind of just improving, which means they're getting their expertise in things. Their transition into midlife is conformist to experimental. Then their leadership style later on is pluralistic and indecisive. Their reputation as elders is sensitive, and they're supposedly liked. Supposedly liked.
But there's a big difference between those in a political space and those that are your next door neighbors. Because I would argue that any of the silent generation people that I've even lived near have all been very nice people.
I mean, my grandmother was silent and she was a nice person. They're not, I mean, they're, okay, their positive reputation is caring, open minded, expert. Their negative reputations are sentimental, complicating, indecisive. So, I mean, they are complicating. They're the ones who will create the bureaucracy in every generation. They like to manipulate things to serve themselves a bit more because they're not the get things done hero generation that built everything. They have to find a way to take what was built and find their niche in it to find their acceptance. And they usually do that by manipulating the system itself
Right.
to be experts in how the system works. When we get to the profit generation, so that would be our boomers, missionary, transcendental, and their positive reputation is principled, resolute, creative. Their negative is narcissistic, presumptuous, and ruthless. I mean, they're supposed to be the group that comes of age, like they're becoming young adults when the hero generation is ruling over the new empire of sorts that they built, the new world order, and they're always there to question the morality and spirituality. They feel like things are just too effective without caring, right? They don't,
Right.
it doesn't have the human element, the creative element. So that's where you get your hippies from, right? And then let's go to nomad, and their positive reputation is savvy, practical, perceptive. Their negative reputation is unfeeling, uncultured, and immoral. I mean, they're just the generation that's supposed to get things done. That's where you get your generals from. So you got Generation X, you got Lost, and the Gilded Generation, and Liberty. So this is where your George Washington is from. This is where every general, most of the soldiers from the Civil War are from. This is where your General Patton is from. Mr. Blood and Guts out there, doesn't care. It's an interesting constellation of generations when you look at it. And basically, heroes raise prophets, artists raise nomads, and then it's the reverse.
I mean,
when
there's some combo, because once you get past the midpoint of any of these generations, there's some overlap.
There is, but the way to say that they raise them is that the older generation dominates the policy of how to raise them when it comes to schooling.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as the slightly older generation is involved, it's going to have a bigger impact than the younger one, even though there's couples where you could have a hero artist raise a prophet, right? It's the hero generation dominates the raising of prophets because they set the tone.
The hero generation, yeah, I can see what you're saying. And generally speaking, your mentors and teachers are going to be of that generation.
Yeah.
Because even if you had a young parent who was an artist who had a prophet, they're probably still going to see a lot of influence from the hero generation.
And just historically, if we're being honest, if there was a younger parent, it tended to be the mother anyway. So there's a little bit more on the disciplinary side from the father there back in the day.
Fair enough. Okay.
Back in the day, it shifts a bit once you get to the millennial. Mothers were very active in the schools and stuff.
So those four archetypes are what makes up the saeculum. So every 80 years, you'll see a hero, an artist, a prophet, and a nomad, except for the one skip you see there, which is during the Civil War.
Yep. And as far as America's concerned, we've gone through multiple of these.
They named the artist generation the Homelanders. Is that real? Hold on, was that in the book?
I don't remember that being in the book.
No, it's not in the book. Somebody made that up. They're trying to save Gen Z from being Gen Z.
So this is a terrible chart that you put up now, but yeah.
Well, no, it's easier to read than this one.
Yeah, no, I get you. We've gone through basically World War II, the Civil War, and the American Revolution as far as
since America was founded, yeah.
And then they expand that out to the French and Indian War, basically, and beyond that to the Elizabeth with the Spanish Armada going to invade Britain, but getting destroyed in the English Channel. And then you had the Arthurian one, which was basically the War of the Roses.
Oh, yeah. So maybe the next thing we should discuss then before we get into like history here.
Yeah.
The moods of the fourth turning.
Yeah.
Which is kind of described here. So a turning, we'll define it right here. A turning is an era with a characteristic social mood, a new twist on how people feel about themselves and their nation. So the four turnings are as follows. The first turning is considered the high. This follows the crisis, which is the fourth turning. The family ties are strong. The child nurture starts loosening. The gap in the gender roles hits its maximum distance. Ideals have been settled. Institutions are reinforced. Culture is innocent. Social structure gets unified. The worldview gets simple. Social priority hits maximum community. Social motivator is shame. So we shame people from not fitting in and not doing what they're supposed to. Since the greatest need is to do what works with a vision of the future that is brightening, and wars at this time are restorative, or fighting for restoration.
They confirmed the world order at the time, basically.
Right. And when you hit this, it's kind of like the same chart. Like strong men build strong life, and then weak men build weak life. Or I'm sorry, strong men to weak men, and
strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create bad times.
Crisis.
Yeah, bad times create kind of strong men. So so in the high, it's like
he basically points this out with the family unit though. Strong, weakening, weak, strengthening.
So you got restorative wars. That'd be like the Korean War.
Yeah.
And
so
then
second, go ahead.
No, well, then we hit the second turning, which is an awakening. The families are weakening. Your children nurture is underprotective, and then you have narrowing, discovered, attack. For ideals are discovered, gender roles were narrowing, institutions are under attack. So think the hippies, right? Culture is passionate, social structure is splintering, worldview is complicating, social priority is rising individualism. You got social motivator is conscience. You got a sense of greater need for a fixed inner world. And then vision of future is euphoric, and then wars are controversial. So Vietnam, in this instance, was one of these.
It's very interesting based on how the culture feels about the war at the time. It does affect how the war is fought and the outcome of the war.
Yeah.
So keep going. Well, I'll do the unraveling then.
Okay.
So in the third turning, which is an unraveling, which is supposedly what we just went through in the last 30 years or 20 years, however you want to look at it. The families get very, very, very weak. Child nurture starts to tighten because you wind up with a generation that wants to protect the children. There's a gap in gender roles at a minimum. Like, for example, men and women doing the exact same things. The ideals are debated. Institutions have eroded. People lose all faith in institutions. Culture gets very cynical. The social structure gets as diversified as possible. Not the modern day definition of diversity. We're talking like things are physically different.
You have people aren't unified at all. That's kind of the thing. You got
you're saying like mindsets are diversified.
Yeah.
To the
culture clubs. You got different little culture clubs popping up everywhere.
The melting pot becomes a bowl of soup of all different kinds of things that are not mixing very well.
They describe it as a salad in the book.
Yeah, you go from soup to salad. Worldview is complex. Social priority becomes maximum individualism. Although I would actually kind of disagree with that. You've got more of maximum groupism and also maximum individualism existing at the same time. Social motivator is guilt. Interesting. Sense of greatest need is do what feels right. That's definitely true for the unraveling period. Vision of the future is darkening, and wars get very inconclusive. Think like the wars in the Middle East.
Yes. And then in the fourth turning crisis, which we're supposedly entering now, well, we've entered. So now families are strengthening. Child nurture is overprotective. gap in gender roles is widening. Ideals championed, institutions founded. Culture is practical. We have not reached that yet. Social structure is gravitating. Worldview is simplifying. Social priority is rising. Community. Social motivator is stigma. Sense of greater need is fixed outer world. Vision of the future is urgent, and wars are total. So, I mean, what's your biggest takeaway from that, Chris?
Well, overall, I think they get a lot of the mood correct, but I think that there are some issues. For example, I definitely feel my the family structure of my own family has definitely gotten more protective and more strengthened.
Yeah.
And I would definitely say there's been some gender role changes and various things going on. So clearly the gap is widening. The ideals, I think they're all over the place right now. Like when you talk about being in a crisis, when ideals are supposed to be championed, they're all over the place right now. So when he writes his book, The Fourth Turning is Here, I'm interested to see what he thinks is being clamped down on, because I don't see it. Institutions are being founded as we speak. Well, I think people are still demanding that foundations get shut down.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue we're still very early in a fourth turning crisis, if anything, because
Climax hasn't hit yet, that's for sure.
yeah, I mean, gap in gender roles, I feel like we've only just now hit minimums with the whole trans issue as a topic. I feel like we've just now finally hit the minimum and are starting to turn around. Within the last year, man.
I don't know what the ideals are going to be coming out of this, but I have to say a lot of cultural norms over the past 20 years have eroded past the point of returning to normal shortly.
Yeah, I mean, our culture is very cynical right now still. We have not reached practical yet.
I think one of the major factors is that people are living far longer than when they created this, it seems to me.
Yes. No,
so
I agree.
80-year cycle may be extended out to almost 100-year cycle.
My thing is, yeah, I agree completely that my thought process was, because they make a big deal about how, America is just so linear in our thought process. We are just radical, and that's why we're so close to 80 years for our cycles, right? They make a bunch of that type of reference in the book, and I'm inclined to think, though, that England was at 100 years prior to our revolution because they were at empire status, and we were a very radical new nation that just got founded, right? It wasn't a simple thing. It was a very fundamentally different experiment with a lot of radicalism, which
you also have to look at when people reach adulthood, because I think that greatly impacts their impact to the culture. So for example, if you were born pre-1900, you were an adult like 15.
True, but
and think about the amount of time people think of you as still a kid. I know people that haven't grown up at all, and they're our age.
Yeah. I mean, we were also kind of a backwater in the beginning. So when you look at how things change with civilization, you have comfort, right? Once the more empire status you are, the more comfortable you are. But also, if you're coming to the end of empire status, like England was, right? The English Empire was towards the end of its arc at that point. You have a lot of institutional levers to pull to kind of prolong the decay of an unraveling. At least anything can get prolonged. For example, how our money system works, everything. If you didn't have the world reserve currency, do you think we could have handled the 2008 recession the way we did? We wouldn't have been able to. So in like empire status things, well, in this case, world superpower status, really does lend to the case that we have an extended cycle compared to our past ones, in my opinion. And then you get the people living longer.
We do have a comment on Rumble that I'm going to bring up.
Okay.
They said, what about the impact of the internet?
No, that's okay. We're going to get there. I think that's a huge aspect where I think it reinstituted a further unraveling. Wouldn't you agree, Chris?
I think it's interesting to compare and contrast the speed of technology and the slowdown of generational change. I think those two things working together affected what should have been a hero generation and made coming to adulthood take longer, and also impacted a lot of societal norms that had never been impacted before.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the internet has been a huge impact on the hero and artist generation this time around, because it kind of just smacked us right in the middle of the hero gen almost.
I mean, the internet showed up for me in a big way around the time I turned about 10 years old with flash games and that kind of stuff.
I mean, dial-up was a thing, but once it went beyond dial-up, right? The cell phone culture, once everything.
Hey, unlike you, I actually use the internet on dial-up.
No, I'm just saying. Well, okay, I lived in the middle of nowhere, Chris. All right, everything was slow getting to me, but
I remember hearing that.
I guess with the internet, especially when we really need to look at social media. When did Facebook really take off?
2007.
2007. So around that point, I think
YouTube started in 2005, but it wasn't really broadly available to the public till about 2006.
Yeah. So the biggest issue with the internet that I see is that Gen Z is almost unprotected again. As they're supposed to be an artist generation, right? But because of the internet, they're primarily raised in an underprotected world because they're interacting way more on the internet instead of with worlds controlled by the adults around them.
It's almost like physically they're protected like an artist, but they're on the internet. They are basically
ideologically they're not.
Like they're. I think that's probably the most surprising thing to parents of a Gen Z child is that these kids have been able to do whatever they want in their brain and on the computer, because although protected in the sense that they're physically safe, they are mentally not unstable. That's a bad way to say it. They're mentally open to pretty much the entire world. And their parents were taken aback by not realizing just how open the internet was and how freely available it was. It's like saying that they're basically nomads on the internet, but artists in physicality.
Well, it's beyond that, right? I mean, they're raised primarily by Gen X, which is a nomad group who's trying to protect their kids. But even Gen X, who had access to the internet in some form early on, right? They really pioneered a lot of things on it. They weren't prepared for what social media would become.
Yeah, see, they only talk about the internet in 6 places in the entire book.
Yeah, it's not much because.
So the first time they mention it is during the discussion.
They talk about risks.
So it says Hollywood's replacing cinematic child devils with child angels, and cable TV and the internet are cordoning off child-friendly havens. But it isn't. The internet's not at all child-friendly.
Well, when we were kids, there were ways to better protect the internet for children in schools and stuff with the firewalls. And because most people didn't have computers at home right away. When he's writing...
I'm going to get an algorithm attack for this one, but here we go. It says, the next time they mention is the culture wars had as many combatants as America had niches, from the Nation of Islam to the internet.
Yeah.
Next time he mentions it, I'm just going to read all the different internet spots, because I don't think they at all expected the internet to have as much of an impact as it did. Aided by the internet and other media inventions, boomers will carve out new concepts of a community within mental and moral rather than physical and institutional boundaries. I mean, kind of. You know,
They have.
the bulk of people on Facebook are boomers.
Yeah.
And you get to the internet here on page 242. As more 13er families form families, they will finally start voting in respectable numbers. 1998, they will comprise America's largest potential generational voting bloc. Actually, I don't think that's true.
They have. I mean, I don't think they have.
By the end of the unraveling, the largest actual bloc. By the end of the unraveling, that's possible, but I don't know. We'll see.
No, the unraveling should be right now. I don't think they have.
Once they discover the voting booth, their prior partisan detachment will work to their advantage. Come the 00s, 13ers will occupy the critical margins of politics, but they don't. You've got that up. Give me 1 second, though.
Yeah.
They'll apply their pop and politics internet skills for the benefit of candidates who avoid hype. Well, that was like Obama. That's what he did.
Mm-hmm.
Who do what it takes to get a job done and who promise not to make their problems worse. And to a lesser effect, Donald Trump also did the same thing.
Yeah.
They really went after... But that was the boomers. That wasn't the 13ers.
The boomers have just kept up what they're doing. They pay some 13ers to help them, but 13ers have kind of just sat on the sidelines, in my opinion.
The next time he mentions the internet, this is the fifth time, so we've got nothing coming from the internet here. It says, unlike circa 1980, 13ers, the high-tech child of the 1990s, is less a home alone game freak than a pen pal on the internet with a parent on their shoulder.
See, they're not, though.
No.
They're like little culty groups on the internet now. That's not even close to
the bulk of Redditors are probably Gen X and Gen Z.
Yeah.
And millennials. All right, here we go. Here's the last part. The internet will start teaching netiquette and will help parents shield as adolescents from chat room. No, they never did. They never got a handle on this.
No. There was no way to
Facebook
control
and
it.
all TikTok, the internet is the worst place for your child to be these days.
Let's be honest though, the internet was not bad until the invention of the algorithm. The social media algorithm is the problem.
You mean indoctrination programming? Yeah.
Yes, I'm just saying the thing that causes conflict and brings people to really random. The algorithm is literally the problem that made the internet less of a protected space, because you're not able to kind of be isolated to your people you actually know that you can meet in person. You're so easily channeled to whatever wacky group because you show interest in one video one time and then you're rabbit holed, right?
The algorithm, and without trying to necessarily, the New York Times tried to claim that a lot of really popular YouTubers led you to like these moderate people were right wingers. Like, no, that's not true. But here's the thing they don't talk about that they actually kind of stumbled upon. If you watch one PewDiePie video, what's the algorithm going to show you tomorrow?
Another PewDiePie video.
And then the next day?
Another PewDiePie video.
And if you've watched at least a couple minutes of it, it's going to keep getting those couple minutes out of you.
Dude, even if you linger over a video when you're scrolling, it registers that and shows you more of that video.
Mm-hmm.
Because it realizes that you were like momentarily. So if you want to not have your algorithm screwed up, never pause your scroll on a screen when you don't know what's behind that on that screen, because it will mess with.
I always search. I don't even use the algorithm. I just search directly for what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Like that's one habit that I've formed over the years of trying to fight the algorithm to not pick things. I will search directly for what I'm looking for. If I don't find it, I do a new search until I find what I'm looking for. I do not watch things that are closely related to what I want. I watch what I want, and that's it.
I mean, when you look at it, right, I feel like the unraveling has gone way longer than it should have.
Oh, no doubt on that. I think let's get to the unraveling portion of the book then. But yeah, they way underestimated the internet and where it wound up, because the internet is a scary place for a kid, and I think that most kids would be better off without the internet, except for like research topics, and that's it. And you know what? Go to a library and get an encyclopedia.
Chris, I think there's an age. I think there is an age where you don't need to be on the internet. I would argue it's until you've gone through puberty. Because with the way social media apps are now, all this AI bullshit with the Photoshop, it's causing so much self-esteem issues for all these people. And now look at it, how like this overprotective thing, right? Because they're supposed to be overprotected, and that has resulted in how many antidepressants and behavioral drugs like ADD medicine, how many kids have been put on all of these, oh, there's a pill for that, right? I'm feeling down today. There's a pill for that. Oh, I can't concentrate. There's a pill for that. Oh, we've got to protect our kids. Let's put
Gen
them
Z
on,
is the
let's
most
put 'em
medicated
on,
generation in American
yeah,
history.
let's put them on birth control when they turn like 12, 13. Like, oh, they got acne, give them a pill for that. It's like there's never a thought that these medications are now under protecting the kids because they don't know how to handle anything. It's like you're actually attacking their nature by
I mean, we
drugging them.
went from kind of helicopter parents from when you and I were kids to like the parents are holding the emperor in the what do you call that when a whole bunch of people are holding the kid on the or holding the emperor on the chair when they're walking down, like the parents are now carrying the kid on the
Dude,
Catamaran, whatever they're
think
called.
about it. We went from Gen X being heavy drug users as kids.
And according to statistics, the most aborted generation in history.
Yeah, and just hated in general. Well, also most victimized by divorce too.
Yeah,
and
that's a big deal.
And broken homes. Yeah, and then
you just have to look at the statistics, and it's very clear that affected them negatively.
I mean, to the point though that they're now over medicating their children. Now their kids are the most drugged prescription children.
I think
on
the
drugs
thing is making I think we're rebounding out of that right now as we speak. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people that are trying everything but that.
There are, but I'm saying that Gen Z has been primarily raised on that. Even late millennials have been as well, and I can't help but think that has had a huge impact in continuing the unraveling. Period.
Because when you got a whole bunch of people hooked on, like for example, if you got everybody on depressants or like lowers or what do you want to call them, then people's moods are going to be different,
right?
If they were, I mean, just even if somebody who has like major ups and downs or emotional swings, the ups will be far less culturally impactful, and the downs will be also far less culturally impactful if you are modifying that.
Right. And I don't know.
I'm curious now if he even talks about pharma in here at all.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. There's a little bit of talk about the pill and the sexual revolution.
Yeah, I mean
that's the extent. Which
there's
I have to say.
Wow.
Yeah, I have to say that my least favorite generation in all of history is the silent generation. Because look at their arc, man. Look at their arc through history. The silent generation has been atrocious.
You know what another major shift that happened in the last 100 years? I was watching a documentary on how royalty used to observe and handle funerals and death. And prior to modern day, when an old person died, it wasn't in a hospital, highly drugged up in a bed. You would be in your bed in your house, and you'd be experiencing, the slow death, and your family would come around and they'd all sit with you while you're dying in your own home in your comfortable place. And nowadays, I can't tell you the last time I've seen somebody die in their house with their family surrounding them. It's usually
everyone got moved too.
Yeah.
But going back real quick, Chris,
it's kind of strange when you think about it.
Let's evaluate our silent generation. All right, they're the worst hit by the sexual revolution, to the point that they're breaking up homes, making
the silent generation.
Yeah, they're the ones who were midlife when the sexual revolution came, to the point then they started getting divorced. That's why 13ers are have so much influence from broken homes.
I don't know why, but I always just assumed that the 13ers' parents were pretty much all boomers.
No, man. Most Gen X was raised primarily by the silent artist generation, who wanted to be respected by the hero generation GIs, but never really were, and then wanted to be liked by boomers. And as a result, they embraced the sexual revolution and all of the worst boomer aspects to try to be hip and cool. They felt
It's like that
they
70s show.
it is. No, it actually kind of is the parents on the one side. No, so they get divorced because they're feeling like, oh, motherhood wasn't worth the whatever deal and everything. So you have Gen X being in broken homes, parents just kind of splitting up to go do their hookup culture at the time. There's the you go into the next phase, right? And they're trying to be respected by GI, but they're not really being respected. They're just the know-it-alls who have made the system work for themselves. They're the expert class.
Okay, but,
And
right before the sexual awakening, as you called it,
yeah,
wasn't that the period of time right when like housewives were on like the most amount of drugs in history with like laudanum and quaaludes? And I mean, I watched Wolf of Wall Street. I'm pretty sure
Bro.
some of the ones they used.
I'm pretty sure all of those drugs were heavily used during the awakening
You think so?
itself. Yeah, because that's when they were unsatisfied. It wasn't the cultural, it was no longer the cool, satisfying thing to be the housewife, the homemaker. That's when
fair.
that's when it all started down that path where they were saying that the deal was raw, that it wasn't a good deal anymore. They wanted to go do their expert class thing. So you have all of that happen, and then we get into the next phase of the turning, and they're trying to be cool and well liked by boomers. So they go into
we're in
bureaucracy.
the awakening right now. Okay.
Yeah, they go and they want to be liked. So they do this whole thing where they start being very bureaucratic, making it where government doesn't function anymore. The regulations are shit. The legal processes are shit. They just keep making it where you have to keep going through all these new hoops. Nothing is ever settled. Nothing is settled. There's always an appeal.
So
there's always something
when
else.
this book was written, based on the fact they didn't, assume the internet.
Yeah.
This book was written essentially during the what would have been the third turning unraveling, at least in their mindset. What aspects do you think they got correct, and what aspects do you think they got very, very wrong?
Are you asking about which thing? I guess with regards to what? Predictions for the future, or
one of the things that they discuss, and this is in the audiobook version, maybe not in the book directly, but I'm sure it's in the book. They talk about how if you're going to get a fourth turning crisis, generally the government has to go lean, and I haven't seen that happen at all.
No, they're saying that you need to lean out government if you want to be successful. The thing, okay, it was in the recommendations for government to go lean. It was They were expecting. Okay, the issue is what they got wrong. I don't know if I would say they necessarily got it wrong. I would say that there's no way they could have predicted it. So they kind of predicted, actually, silent being more active than they should be. I don't think they anticipated how long silent was going to stay the expert in leadership class. I don't think they anticipated that properly, but they hinted that it could be a thing. So they got it right, but I don't think they made calculations based off of it, because they expected wrongly that Gen X was going to get way more active sooner, like in the 00s. All right.
And instead, they spent a long time not getting active.
Yes, and when the 2008 financial crisis happened,
that was when nomads were kind of
But he underestimated how much. Well, no, he underestimated the ability of silent and boomers to coalesce together to protect their retirement funds. I think he also they were
very wrong about boomers not having good nest eggs, because I don't know very many boomers that don't have some decent nest eggs.
Well, they've also managed to keep Social Security and Medicare programs. They have. I think he underestimated the selfishness of boomers because he was under the assumption that boomers would care more about their grandchildren and the hero generation who they saw as the future, and that has not happened. They've kept programs that they know are going to go bankrupt without trying to make any cuts to the future of them. So when they get things wrong like that. They underestimated the worst natures of the current generations.
I would agree with that.
The silent man, people don't realize it, even though they've only ever had one president now with Biden.
So
the silent
JFK
generation
wasn't silent.
No, he was GI, man.
Oh, he was behind. He was before.
He was GI. He was just young GI. The issue with the silent is they've been behind the scenes. They've dominated government cabinet positions and advisor positions when they wrote this book, it was for like the last 3 or 4 administrations. And if you look at the stats now, I'm pretty sure they've dominated it all the way until maybe the last presidency. So,
and when you look at this aspect, right? So when they first took over, unfulfilling, interdependency, young adulthood, they start to improve, but then they go from conformist to experimental, and then pluralistic and indecisive. These are the people you least want in charge of things.
Well, they're the reason things collapse, because they spent the entire time making systems complicated so they could be rewarded for expertise, not getting things done. Expertise. So it's very terrible when they're in charge. I mean, if you basically would want almost any other generation but them leading.
At this point, yes.
It's a sad reality when you look at it. But the artist generation is the last group you want to do anything. Maybe you want them to be a diplomat.
And they've been in charge the longest.
No, but like seriously, maybe you want them to be a diplomat. That would be like maybe their best role because they're caring and liked. But as far as leading and making decisions goes, they're the last group you want.
Yeah.
And as far as when you look at the 2008 crisis and 9/11 and everything as well, the way all of those
you're talking about 2008 here. They say, let's see here. What does it say?
They predict.
The great devaluation is likely to hit boomers just as their first cohorts are reaching official ages of retirement, long before Social Security is now projected to go into official bankruptcy. Indeed, the panic could be triggered in part by the crystallizing financial anxieties of leading-edge boomers. The flashpoint may well occur when the elder mindset of the 1943 victory baby cohort combines with the demographic realities of the large 1946 baby boom cohort to reach a critical mass. This could occur a few years before or after 2005, perhaps 2002, when the 1943 cohort reaches their IRA distribution age of 59 and a half, and 2008, when the 1946 cohort reaches the initial Social Security eligibility age of 62, the age at which over 2/3 of Americans now start receiving benefits.
Yeah.
Hey, there you go. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's true that's partly part of the problem, but they underestimated our ability. No one could have predicted our response in 2008 to just print money. Right? Yeah. That's in itself kind of a crisis. And the issue is, though, that it was an indecisive one. A perfect example of silent leadership, okay, or artist leadership. And that has postponed everything into the fourth turning. So I guarantee, in my opinion, this is not financial advice, but in my opinion, there is definitely going to be a 1929 style depression. The way, so? Oh yes, because you have multiple aspects coming into play. Not only has inflation been terrible, right? Not only has that made tons of zombie companies trading well above their actual revenue value, you also have another fundamental issue, and that is demographics. And when you look at a lot of countries, they're dying, man. You are going to lose like 40% of China's population in the next 2 decades. That's not just China though. That's a lot of places. And when you have such a die off of the boomer generation, that's going to be a huge impact on stock prices. You don't have a big enough young population to absorb that new supply of stocks. So there's going to be a huge devaluation. Huge.
Yeah, and here's something that I find interesting in the books is at the turn of the millennium, the election of an empathic silent president, so we're talking 20 years before we actually got one, might stretch out the unraveling era just long enough to restrain boomers and 13ers from engaging their worst instincts until both have had a chance to mature further. Once the crisis catalyzes, however, the time for silent leadership will expire. It's been expired for 20 years.
I just want to point out that that the silent has been prolonging everything because they're just indecisive.
The silent could prove that good intentions can make a difference. How about bad intentions? If the silent play their script badly, they will end their lives like Webster, Clay, and Calhoun, featuring that national greatness hoisted by others in their childhood will pass away with them.
I mean, no, silent has been the worst generation America could have ever had, in my humble opinion.
This could be a really good thing to discuss next is the scripts here. So the generational scripts, do you want to jump into that next?
Yeah, we can do that. Where do you want to start with the
Well, let's just start with the GIs. The hero doesn't.
Yeah, let's just jump into the history real quick on why we think I feel like our past cycle was robbed because they lacked a hero generation as an example.
Talk about the Civil War.
Yes, no, World War II. World War II lacked a hero. The heroes that grew up for World War II, right? The GI
did not have a previous hero generation.
They did not have a previous hero. No one who raised them had a previous hero generation as an example. So the reason our government expanded so much and so rapidly is we had an overabundance of of artist generations lead us.
Right.
Because we had the progressive era, right? They led for a ridiculously long time, ending up with Woodrow Wilson as president. Okay, like this group is the reason we have the income tax and everything like that. And then we ended up getting a prophet generation in the missionary gen that was raised by artists, not heroes.
Yep.
Right? When you think about that, they were raised.
Well, it was more like prophets raised by nomads.
Nomads and artists.
Yeah.
It's a very, I realize it's a very condensed. They have a very condensed thing, but they didn't have a hero generation to raise them.
Right.
And then.
What are you talking about? Abraham Lincoln was my hero.
Yeah, but they didn't. Okay, they didn't have that building group, right? That was supposed to build on everything that was decided. They just had the bureaucracy group that made things convoluted. All right. And then you get FDR who comes in there and they're just championing away on different building projects and expanding the scope of government. And then you have to go fight a war. It makes perfect sense, though.
Snooze deal. What?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense how the GIs came back with the mindset of they can do anything and it doesn't matter what they do. That's what they did. They came back super hubristic. I like certain things they did. I despise other things they did. And they went away very selfishly because they were just so fed up with their boomer children.
That's a fact.
That's how it's written in this book is they got so sick that they're like, okay, pay us to go retire and we'll leave you alone. And all they've done is all they ever did was expand the retirement benefits at the end.
The greatest expansion of government occurred as the GIs got old.
Yes. And that's because
that's one of the biggest issues.
Yeah, and the problem is they were raised purely by groups that are known for expanding government.
Right. Skipping one of the 4 generational groups clearly does not help the future generational groups.
Yeah.
But if you're going to skip one, why don't they skip the artist?
Yeah, artist.
Just kidding.
No, that would be okay with me. I would be fine with skipping the artist generation. If you know what, if our Gen Z is more like nomads, I might be happier. I might honestly be happier.
They're somewhere between a nomad and an artist, because like in IRL, I feel like they're more of an artist, but on the internet, I feel like they're more like nomads.
Yeah. I'll say this.
They're probably skipping the artist generation to be a prophet. Maybe every like 6 generations skips something.
Maybe, okay, they kind of are preachy. I feel like Gen Z is very preachy, but so is millennial. It's rough, man. I feel it's hard to really pin down the second half of millennial and Gen Z.
I think basically you have to cut the millennial age at the latest 2000. The latest 2000, because if you grew up with the internet always there, like you're different than somebody who grew up pre-internet. I grew up in we're the last generation that grew up where the internet wasn't as prominent as it is today.
Dude, I mean, you and I both grew up when you actually had to call people.
Put discs in your consoles.
Yeah, I mean, or ride your bike over to your friend's house to see if they're home.
Call their landline and hope somebody picks up.
Right. I mean, you're raised differently on that. Even Facebook and stuff for us wasn't a real thing too much until we were well into.
Hey, I still had a rotary phone when I was a kid.
But, I mean, so did I, man. When I was young enough, yeah, it was still a rotary phone. But, dude, no, it's one of those things where Facebook didn't really kick off until we were basically graduated from high school.
Well, and it was still immature. Nobody had one of these when we were like a smartphone.
People had them.
Well, I take it back. You graduated after I did.
Not much.
What year was your high school graduation?
2013.
Okay, so by then smartphones were a thing. 2011 was still kind of like,
A lot of people got them in 2012.
Yeah, that was pretty much the time when the iPhone and Android like swept the board.
But when we look at it, right, it's just convoluted. It's a convoluted mess after that.
My first smartphone didn't even have 4G.
Neither did mine.
Would you have, a 3GS?
It was just 3G.
iPhone 3?
Yeah, I think so.
See, my first smartphone was the Evo WiMAX LTE on Sprint. That was 2012 timeframe. WiMAX was technically 4G, but it wasn't LTE.
When we look at it, though, it's
like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, smartphones, we were basically adults when smartphones were available. Gen Z has had them at their fingertips since they could pretty much.
And then the cyberbullying that took off after. I mean,
people were doing it on Instant Messenger. Like, I remember all the movies about like internet bully, and like some girl logs into her MacBook at home, and like everybody's dumping on her.
Yeah, but you didn't have the same. You didn't have the same social pressures with the photoshopped Instagram photos until it was later, man. That was later.
I don't know anybody that photoshops an Instagram picture.
They do. They all do. They all have filters. That's Photoshop in my book.
So maybe we should get into the scripts here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the internet really changes things. Between that and longer lifespans and the impact of the silent not going away, I think they realized if they just stayed in politics, they wouldn't really have to do real manual work. And so they just keep staying in politics.
I mean, the problem is literally that silent has stuck around so long, and because they don't want to give up their legacy.
Because like the silent generation that retired are very different from the silent generation that are still in politics. I feel like there's a huge disconnect there.
They talk about it in this book where the silent has this very very shitty perspective that in order to make life better for one group of people, you have to make the lives worse for others.
Yeah.
That's how their mindset works, because they have to take from others and give to others. Like, it's
here's a very clear statement here. Younger generations will never compel GIs to give up their hero reward.
100% true.
So the GIs are pretty much I mean, that generation's almost entirely gone at this point.
They are gone.
There might be a few people left. There's probably a couple people out there.
There's one or two who are like almost 100 years old in a nursing home.
But here's what it says. It says, lacking resources and civic nurture, millennial children might not grow up with enough of that legendary right stuff to triumph in the fourth turning. And this is exactly the concern you have right now.
Yeah.
The GIs who put the sword back in the stone after VJ Day have waited 4 generations for a child to arrive who could pull it out again. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think we lacked resources just because they kept printing money. But I think our generation's development has been tarnished a bit by the way the silent behaves.
So here's the silent script. Having witnessed the last crisis as an anxious child, the artist will approach the next one as an anxious elder. You'll see its catalyst. Like, honestly, when you look at it, though, the silent were born between, what, 1920, 1940?
Basically.
Somewhere in there?
Yeah.
Most of them, if the crisis is now, are nearing between 80 and 100 years old.
Yeah, man.
Like, there's definitely some kind of cultural shift in this aspect. But here we go. And the fact that they still make up so much of Congress is bizarre. But here we go. It says their residual powers reside mainly in courtrooms. If they block the next New Deal, silent jurists would follow in the crisis aggravating secular footsteps of Roger Taney in the 1850s. Silent should defer to the 13er view that experts can be dead wrong, which they don't.
They have not done.
They have never deferred to that.
Nope.
But professional elites can stumble over simple choices, and that kind intentions do not always produce kind results. That's a fact.
I mean, just look at COVID, man, and how the experts, the expert class thing has been. I think
you can safely say that the expert class has changed scripts many, many, many times over the course of the last 3 years.
I'm just saying, though,
they had a very hard time getting anything right.
Yes, and I'm just saying that the silent generation is the reason we have this mantra of trust the experts, because that is how they've built the culture of everything.
So here's what we just stated. If the silent play the script badly, I think we already talked about that. But it says they remain committed to an end that is at once enduring and flexible. Mm-hmm. Let's see, what was the other thing we said? Oh, millennial nurture depends on this change continuing of the name of reform. Kindest thing that silent can do for millennials is be helpmate, and perhaps by dint of their smaller numbers, the silent can sneak through unnoticed with GI style elder reward. They have not been silent. Whatever.
No, you should go back a page. You missed something very good that was.
Okay, what part did I miss?
Did you miss as the crisis deepens, 13er style survivalism will trump silent style procedural democracy every time? Because that's true.
It is true, but the problem is that the silent style they didn't hand over the reins to the 13ers.
Yeah. No, I know. I'm saying
the silent should defer to the 13er view. Yeah, no, I said that the experts.
Yeah, you said that first one, but I was saying the second part.
They should avoid intruding on the moral judgments of boomer legislatures and avoid using detail, complexity, and delay to stifle the recrudescence of civic authority.
They haven't.
Which they haven't, no, because they still control the government. So,
yeah.
Anyways, what's the boomer script? The fourth turning brings special meaning to the prophet because the seasons of Sakulin exactly match those of his own life, because they were born in the artist generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so history seasons are those of his life cycle, where the prophet's shadow, the hero, had his greatest trial young. The prophet will find in old age. To achieve their late life glory, prophet must harness civic duty and the skill of the old hero, whom he rewards but does not honor, and child hero, whose temperament he nurtures but does not understand. Oh yeah, so they are the next great champion.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of options for great champion. I know your favorite option would be like a Ron Paul. But yeah. I think he's technically a silent generation.
Is he technically?
So he would not fit that if that's the case. I'm curious now if he's a boomer or a silent.
It's hard to tell.
I know he's
Ron
old.
Paul's old.
I know he's old.
I don't think he's Biden old. Is he?
I mean, he's more spry.
I mean, hey, at least he has some youth to him.
Ron Paul, he's 35, so he's a silent.
No, that's. Oh yeah, okay. I thought you were saying like he's 35 years old. What?
Yeah, man.
No.
He just looks old. No, no. So he's firmly in the end phase of the silent generation.
Yeah, I mean, he's a silent though who actually he actually started movements though that our experts are wrong. He's like the opposite.
Well, yeah, he did. He definitely did that.
He's the most self-aware silent generation individual ever.
He's like that. He's like that dude within the organization that calls out the organization.
You know who is silent generation and has never left government because he's just a pile of crap?
Our president?
No, John Kerry.
Oh yeah, fair enough. Is Al Gore silent?
I don't know. I don't think. Maybe he is. I don't think. Is he? I think he's boomer. I think he's with Clinton.
What's Bush? Bush isn't silent. He's a boomer.
No, he's a boomer.
Really?
Yeah, man.
He seems so old.
But his vice president was silent. I guarantee.
So what's Clinton? Is Clinton boomer too?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes, sir.
So what was George H.W. Bush?
GI.
So they just skipped them and just
because Reagan was GI too. Yeah, no one respected silent. Like, this is the thing you have to realize: GIs did not respect them because they were worthless, bureaucratic punks. Okay, they didn't respect them, and then because they weren't respected by the GI and they just wanted to be liked by the boomers, they decided to just go full obstructionist against GI policies and made everything bureaucratic and terrible. If you have a complaint with regulations and endless court proceedings and everything like that that's pointless, so basically how our environmentalism program works, the entire EPA, yeah, that is because the silent generation sucks hard, okay? I can't stand them. So another description for the artists is they just postpone unpleasant choices. They are only
it's like kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, they're only ever mediators between hero and prophet, and they're just a real bad elder, like because they just want to be liked. It's the problem I had with the GIs though. Here's my fundamental problem with
because they were the backstop for the boomers.
What?
Yeah, it talks about how the GIs were the backstop for them all along until the GIs.
Yeah, the GIs, basically the boomers had. So the boomers have a psychological sense of entitlement. Their psychology
because they had the GIs
right
behind them the whole way through their life.
And they have this thing where privileges became rights. That's the boomer existence, right? Privileges that they had because of the wars and the efforts of GIs were their rights. They had a right. I mean,
look at the difference in perspective on healthcare. Healthcare used to be looked at as a right you got when you worked for a company that provides.
Well, it was a privilege.
Privilege. An aspect of signing on to a company and being a company man.
With the company, you got to remember that was a way to get around the compensation rules that FDR had in place because you could only pay people so much during price controls. So a way to get around that was companies would offer health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
That is when that became a compensation. And personal opinion, I'd rather have health insurance be taken away from employers and just get paid more and have better policies that you don't have to switch around all the time when you leave employers.
I think the balloon effect of the healthcare being provided has resulted in an extremely complicated and extremely time-consuming process of figuring out what you owe a hospital when you go there.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been manipulated hard by silent people who love
the same thing with the ballooning of the college loans, where you provide money so kids can go to school, and then of course 20 years later everybody's paying the same amount they were or more, and they're making more money than ever before, hand over fist at these colleges. It's honestly, this is basically a modern day case of usury.
Yeah, I mean, well, okay, when we look at
that's a direct effect of all the bureaucracy that led to insurance premiums being ridiculous and everything else.
Well, okay, the national health care law that got passed by Obama, that was done in a third turning, and it was a huge expansion of government that was destined to be a terrible bureaucratic nightmare because it's in the third turning. Strauss and Howe both say don't make big policy.
Yeah, you're supposed to bring the government down.
Don't make big policy during a third turning. And when we look though at this boomer psychology of entitlement, right? Strauss and Howe both pointed this out. Like that's them, man. Like that's boomers, but they don't factor in that they're going to be like, hey, we also deserve the GI style retirement benefits because we paid for it for our parents. We should get it too. Like they never thought that was the route that this was going to go. It's kind of crazy. And the issue with the GIs that I have, what I was going to say earlier, they created policies and laws, right, that require future generations to behave just like themselves. And that's the issue. It enables the awakening ills because the future generations do not have the same cultural or moral foundations of ethic that they built the policy for. Their own children couldn't even be raised to have the same work ethic.
Yeah, and here's another thing that they point out in this part. It says, if they allow this overflow into public life, the self-indulgence, and demand generous public benefits, they will bankrupt their children financially and themselves morally. Unlike the silent, sneaking through unnoticed will not be an option. If boomers become pointlessly argumentative and let their values back them into a corner, their current talk show hyperbole about annihilating enemies could translate into orders to use real doomsday machines.
Yeah, I mean,
look at how many of the people in that age bracket on TV currently are so hyperbolic and just nutty on one side or the other.
But it's also very niche issues. They're not even that far away from each other on any policy ever, which makes it they're like a uniparty that's just super hyperbolic and it's annoying as shit.
Oh,
dude.
Yeah.
So another key point that they made up is that silent generation.
Another key point that they made up.
No, okay, they pointed out.
You said that.
Okay. Another that they pointed out was that the silent brought about no-fault divorce.
Oh yeah,
and
that was part of them embracing the sexualized culture.
Yeah, man, they really did that. Oh, I don't know about you, but one of the things that I thought of too while reading this was that COVID and how people have moved around to different states, how many people relocated. That's gonna have a huge impact, and it's a question mark, right? Because the last time we had such geographical differences was the Civil War era. And we're kind of creating new boundaries there, you know?
Well, the thing that I noticed they didn't at all look at was the pattern of internal versus external conflict. So the Revolutionary War, that's an external conflict. The Civil War is an internal conflict.
Yeah.
World War II, external conflict. Now we're into the internal culture wars.
Well, you know what? You know who's the reason for the culture wars?
The boomers?
Silent.
I'm just kidding.
The silent generation is the one who started the policy of multiculturalism.
Yeah.
They're the ones who said, oh, yeah, we don't need to be unified at all. This isn't just shared. There's shared
You know what
culture.
they said during the Bush era that's technically accurate, although they didn't do a good job with it at all, was the united we stand, divided we fall. I mean, that's an accurate slogan for a terrible president.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it before about the GIs backing up the boomers too.
Yeah.
It's a recurring theme throughout this entire book that boomers were raised without consequences. They always got amnesty for their outbursts at colleges, their protests, their sit-ins, whatever, their riots. They always got amnesty. And not just that, they always had this feeling that no matter what happened, the second they decided that they wanted to stop their moral crusading, there was a company job waiting for them.
Yep.
They could just jump in, they could just plug into the American dream whenever they wanted. It wasn't going anywhere. So they could be as asshole-ish as they wanted without any consequences. And a part of, I can't, is Gen Z, real talk here, is Gen Z kind of prophet generation almost? Because they kind of act the same effing way.
I think
No consequences.
I
They
was
get
just thinking about
amnesty.
this, Andrew, but I think you had an internal struggle between the silent and the boomers over the millennials, which greatly divided and affected the way they grew up.
Yeah.
I think the silent were very influential, especially one of the things they also don't take into account here is that although the saculum may act the way that they expect it to,
Mm-hmm.
the people teaching your kids the last 100 years of public education has greatly affected how kids were raised. And so instead of you learning from your parents like pre-public education, you were not necessarily like, if your parents played hands off with you, you were raised by the school. So you might be raised by a generation out from what you should have been.
Yeah, I mean,
public education is not that old.
When we think about it too, when we go a little deeper, because third turnings are supposed to be a case of where you start restricting immigration. The nomad generation is supposed to be the most diverse generation you have. The least diverse generation you have is supposed to be the artist, because they restrict immigration and start getting very protective of that generation. So none of that has happened. Gen Z currently is like the most diverse generation we've ever had.
Well, yeah, we politically, ideology, religiously,
in every way possible, they are literally the most diverse generation there is. Okay, and that's because of silent, man. Silent has prevented all policies that would be like, oh, let's secure the border, anything to not have endless immigration.
No, that fits the artist generation, pluralistic and indecisive.
What
you just said definitely fits leadership style. Well, they're hitting it early though.
Oh, you're talking about are you talking about?
It's like their leadership style right now is happening as they're little and as they're still young as a generation.
Yeah, but they're supposed to be.
They definitely fit the reputation as an elder.
There was a whole section though where they're supposed to not be the most diverse. Gen X is the one that's supposed to. But when the nomad hits adulthood and is trying to protect their kids, they cut back on the immigration. Silent is the least, and that's when they get all like, ooh, multiculturalism in their old age because they weren't raised with it. They're supposed to be protected from outside influences in general.
So here's something else.
At least that's the historical way.
For the crisis to end well, 13ers must keep boomers from wreaking needless destruction and millennials from marching too mindlessly. What about the silent? What does the 13er have to do to the silent? I don't see them talking about
the pasture. That's what it is.
Yeah,
it's not vote for them.
It.
Yeah, it's
they have to vote more. They
literally have to vote more. Yeah,
their own elected officials with certain. That's the problem. The Gen X has never entered the political sphere in a major way.
Okay, but you're forgetting that their parents were primarily silent and boomer, and silent has refused to give up power.
Yeah.
So Gen X has been infantized a little bit longer. Millennial has too, so is Gen Z. Silent has prevented 3 generations from properly growing up. So when I say I despise the silent generation, I mean, okay, look at how silent decided to deal with 2008.
Print money.
They
too decimated.
Let's look at the policies that silent did. Okay, we're going to offshore our manufacturing. For global organizations, right? Because we're going to defer to international trade orgs, the WHO, the UN, whatever. That's silence choice. That was silent generation, right? And now you have it where there's no industrial base. Gen X has had a generational depression. That's a key stat in this book, is that they've had a generational depression where their economic opportunity is down 28% compared to past generations. Okay, like it's terrible for them alone. And then millennials have had issues too because of the fallout of 2008. So Silent has overseen 2 generations having worse economic opportunity than their parents. And if we're honest though, millennial, it's kind of an issue on if you went to college or not for the right thing, because I feel like there's a gap. There is a gap. You're either doing well because of what you went into for schooling, or you're not.
But I will say, unlike the script that they played out at the end, the statement about, orderly and military service and all that, the expectation from boomers on millennials was not military service. It was a different kind of indentured servitude. It was taking on massive college loans from the state.
Going to college, if the degree is useful or not. Yeah. No, they did do that. They found a way to spend more money.
Yeah, there was the expectation of service was that all millennials would go to college and make choices that way, I guess. I don't know. But I think the degree to get paid at a job is a ridiculous expectation. I think a lot of people will find that when they enter the workforce, they learn more about their job at the workplace than they ever would in a college setting.
100%.
And I hope as society progresses, there's less of an expectation on college for most jobs.
Yeah, it's become, well, dude, Silent started this trend with the expertise thing.
When you look at some of the smartest entrepreneurs and people who actually did something with their lives, most of them didn't go to college.
Dude, most of the inventors out there in history were people who just tinkered with shit in their garage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like that's ridiculous.
Apple started as 2 dudes in a garage.
Yeah. Which they wouldn't be able to do now because of the regulations that silent generation politicians have helped push. So what's more silent hate?
The bureaucratic state has made its made its name heard.
Yeah, silent generation is incapable of a balanced budget. Yeah. They're literally incapable of it.
Spend, and spend some more.
Here's context from the book too, because when you're looking at third turning, so unravelings versus crisis, right? How things are supposed to hit their worst in the awakening before turning around.
Well, they delayed any crisis by printing money in 2008.
They did.
You could have had the crisis right then and there.
Potentially, yeah. Well, it should have been. Yeah, you're right. It should have been the crisis. But they managed, because they were still in power, instead of Gen X actually flexing any of their muscles to actually be able to do austerity. That's why that wasn't our fourth turning, right? But look at this stat that they had in there. GI CEOs, right? They earned 41 times the average employee. 41 times. Oh, you think that's a lot?
Well, it's probably way worse now.
Oh, silent generation, according to this book, earned 225 times. 225 times, okay? And it has only gotten worse.
And the boomers are the ones that are considered this entitled.
I just want to point out one generation changed it from 41 times to 225 times.
That's insane.
And boomers have just kept that trend going. And now, I mean, income inequality is, I guess, at a maximum still. Can we say it's at a maximum if it hasn't reversed yet? Yeah, I mean, it's just going up and up and up and more. So
the one thing they did predict really well, but probably didn't see what the outcome was going to be, was the unification of apps and internet and services.
Yeah.
The amount of massive corporations that exist that control the everyday interactions of people has dwindled down to a few. You've got like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble.
Yeah.
and TikTok, Instagram. I mean, Snapchat's huge. I always forget about Snapchat. Who could have predicted what those services would be and how much of a conglomeration of those services
you
exists?
couldn't have. But okay, you brought that up now, and going off of that thing too about where I was saying that the new Gen Z is the most diverse, which is not very much an artist thing, but they're also the most heavily foreign influenced through social media, bot farm, all of those things. Globalism has
globalism.
And because of the
internet.
said
infected, not affected.
But
because globalism
they are
has
infected,
seriously changed their brains.
But because of that global influence, they're not anywhere close to the most sheltered as far as ideology goes. They're not an American ideological base. They're not raised on that, right? They're not learning from whatever the crisis is supposed to be to develop what they think is right to align with the millennial group per se. They're the hero generation. They're learning their own things, and they are taking that bureaucratic thing and really expanding on the alphabet soup to say however many genders there are. I lost count. But
the other thing to think about is Gen Z is the first generation where you can still see history from anybody's perspective all the way back past the GIs. Prior to that, the accuracy of them stating that your maximum influence is 80 years before you were born, or 80 years, was it 80 years after you're born to the 80 years following that? Well, nowadays, the 80 years prior can affect people 80 years down the road without having ever interacted, because of the recordings of the media and the historical media aspects.
But I think it's really important too to realize that most of these kids, right, have not been educated by their parents. Most of these kids have been more influenced by the internet
than anybody else.
Yeah, which is why I say they're almost a second
being raised
nomad.
By the algorithm.
Yeah, they're almost a second nomad generation.
That should be a book.
Artists.
Raised by the algorithm.
You never know, man. It would probably sell
We'll have to
pretty
write
good.
that book. Raised by the algorithm.
Copyrighted right now.
I need to copyright the title.
There was, what was this other one? I had some notes. I'm just looking over real quick. So Silent. They talk about eliminating racial quotas and stuff. Because Gen X just doesn't see all of these being the most diverse generation, supposed to be the most diverse generation, right? They didn't see the need for all of these non-merit based things. And they never took the initiative to get more politically involved.
No, they haven't. That's fair.
As a result of that, you just now had affirmative action ruled on by the Supreme Court.
You had the boomers take care of it, essentially.
Yeah. Finally. It was finally an issue that was dealt with, but it's held on for so long. It's all evidence about how the silent have held on and influenced everything. That's what that is. Right?
I did not realize they ended this with Bible stuff. Ecclesiastes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Dude, I'll say this about Gen Z though. They are obedient.
They are, that's true.
They are hella obedient. Remember during COVID how they would
they're following the cultural norms, right? The silent generation followed the cultural norm, getting a job, working it your whole life.
Are they getting jobs these days?
But no. Gen Z is following the cultural norms. Cultural norm is social media. Make yourself an influencer. Follow the trends. Hope that a bunch of people find you and you go viral.
Yeah,
and if you don't, then you wind up in the comment section of every single person who's popular, and you end up being influenced by somebody else. Gen Z is the generation of influence. Millennials started it, and Gen Z continued it.
I just want to point out that I like their call for the great devaluation because it's going to be even greater than what they anticipated in this book.
Oh, yeah.
Silent has built such a house of cards by being so active. It's almost like our crisis is federal bureaucracy, just in general. That's the true crisis. And you know what? I'll say that that's the crisis is federal bureaucracy, because Trump, and I'll say Trump was the catalyst. Trump's election, because that was the
wake up call for the silent generation.
That broke the silent generation mentally, completely and utterly. Because
they were so disappointed.
Yeah, no, but you've seen how they lost their shit because Trump literally was everything that they're not, as far as their compassion and let's be the most indecisive group possible. Like, let's make sure everyone doesn't have their feelings hurt. He broke them so hard that Biden ran again.
Yeah, because he said he wasn't going to.
Yeah. So, and when he's talking about the deep state, right? When he's talking about the deep state, who is he talking about? It's not the effing boomers. It's everything the silent generation built.
Well, the bulk of people that make up the bulk of people at the top of bureaucratic agencies that exist is going to be silent generation, because
they've also built the culture. Yeah. They've built the culture that is that agency, right? So if you have a problem with any of these agencies, you have a problem with the silent generation.
They're not so silent anymore.
No, they are called the silent generation, but damn, they're the loudest when you look at their influence. It's reading this book, they're my least favorite generation. Every single time I read a single thing about them, I get pissed. Throughout this book, it's just like, yep, silent generation again. Perfect.
Dude. Yeah. I think there's two things here that clearly did not happen as they had hoped. One was the exit of the silent. The other was the entrance of Gen X.
Yeah.
Neither of those things occurred in a timely fashion. We're just starting to get there. You've got plenty of Gen X people in Congress, and now some governors are Gen Xers, and you're seeing the fruits be harvested in that aspect. But it took a lot longer to get there.
I'll say this though. There's one thing about us that is concerning for our generation of millennials. As the hero generation, we have a natural tendency towards collectivism in the teamwork category.
I must not fit in very well.
No. I'm saying, like, you're cooperative as shit, Chris. When you're working on a project with people, you can be pretty cooperative.
Oh, sure. When I'm
you want to achieve the end goals, and you're not like fighting everybody, right? So my point is,
I get called out for being a bit of a loner, actually.
Is it because you're dealing with annoying, more older?
No. It's because usually everybody's focused on something, and I'm like, I think we're not thinking outside the box here.
Well, fair enough. But I think our millennial generation has been screwed up to be part Gen X, part hero. Part.
I think I actually fit hero. More in an almost Gen X phase.
Yeah.
But I was also raised by two parents from different generations.
Same. When I'm talking about this collectivism thing, though, they're talking about how hero generations tend to have they come up with something and they kind of all unify on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's dangerous as a concept that the silent generation has been so influential, because I think that's the root of a lot of that radical leftism. A lot of that collectivism, communism, socialism language. I think that my personal opinion, that's coming from silent people who want everyone to be taken care of, the over compassion to the point of paralysis and bad decisions. So if millennials have been overly influenced by the silent, you could have, we've seen that artist generations have over influenced before, and our GI generation rapidly expanded government. So it's going to be interesting to see how the fourth turning actually does turn out, in my opinion. Given everything, what are your thoughts on the crisis?
I think the crisis clearly occurred somewhere between the crisis was avoided in 08. It should have happened then.
Yeah.
Government decided not to have that happen, and therefore we didn't get it. We didn't get it then.
But that crisis is coming still.
Instead, what we wound up with was the lingering threat of a crisis that kind of hit stride between 2016 and 2020. It started with the 2016 elections, and it kind of went full send around 2020 with COVID.
Yeah, I'll say that everything. Trump's election in 2016 broke people because if we're saying part of the crisis is federal bureaucracy, right? Just silence over expansion as a generation. They're over influence. The fact that the expert, the anointed one, Hillary, lost to somebody outside, basically the most Gen X thing that could have happened as far as saying experts aren't always right thing, with the election of Trump, like that challenge there was enough to break them hard to the point that they just changed their persona.
If you were looking for somebody who fit the description of a gray champion, I think if you wanted to call Trump that, you would not be too far off, because a lot of people found what he said resonated with them, and he was calling out the bureaucracy. And
I'll say he called bullshit. He called bullshit in a way that no one had done before. His election is more gray champion than him himself.
That's what I mean. Like, if you wanted to call him that, you probably could. Another person who would kind of fit that definition without actually living the role he claims to live would be like a Bernie Sanders calling out the millionaires.
I mean, he was, he kind of was. He showed a different thing. You gotta remember, he showed the corruption on how they would never let Hillary lose.
Right, he did.
No matter how many elections she lost in the primaries, they would never let her lose.
But he would kind of fit that definition as well.
He does, but for the same reason Trump does. Not necessarily himself, but for
a third one that fits it, though, is the man that currently cannot put his face out on the internet at all, which is RFK Jr.
Yeah, no, he kind of does.
Like, there's quite a few people out there that fit gray champion definitions. The problem is, with the internet, you can have many gray champions.
You know who else fits something here? You got DeSantis over there as a general of a Gen X general, a nomadic general right there, getting things done in Florida.
Regardless how you feel about the guy, he can get he's
been getting things done, and he's been doing it,
handling his policies the way he wants to handle them,
and he's been doing it exactly how nomads are described within this book.
Is Gavin Newsom Gen X?
I believe so.
So technically, he would be the anti-DeSantis.
Yes, he got things done in California from a tyrannical view. Hey, so did Whitmer in Michigan.
I'm just saying,
if you expect someone to so effectively lock down a state, and ban you from going to stores or having your shops? I mean, she clearly didn't give two shits about what's legal.
No,
the ends justify the means type of, like, that's what your Gen Xers are. So if you actually want them to be your leaders, I don't know if they're necessarily good there. But
okay, if you want to go that route, I got to bring up what they said about Gen X here. Hold on, I'm gonna get a kick out of this one. So in the Gen X script, it says that, where is it here? If 13ers play their script weekly, old boomers could wreak a horrible apocalypse, and 13er demagogues could impose a mind-numbing authoritarianism or both.
Yeah,
and I think that's kind of the outcome we got.
When you see certain ones, they're 100% that.
And depending on where you lean politically, you could look at DeSantis that way.
Yeah, it's when you look at it though, their
I mean,
prediction.
I would definitely say he fits the description of a demagogue, although I would say I'd rather live under his authoritarianism than say like a Whitmer authoritarianism
Yeah.
personally.
The
At least you still have some freedom to move around.
yeah. Is it? I view this current, obviously that catalyst. I wouldn't say COVID was the crisis. I would say it was the
Result of the
it was the Rubicon of the catalyst.
yeah.
Like it was the evidence that we have gone past the point of no return. That was indeed the catalyst. His election was. That's where you will easily define the start of another generation.
If you want to look
tied
at
to that.
his election as waking up the silent generation in the worst way possible, that's basically what happens when he gets elected, because now their last gasp of the generational theory is taking power back and trying to hold on to it until they die.
And somehow they succeeded, where the GI generation failed, sadly, in their efforts.
I'd rather have GIs over silence.
Yeah. So obviously, with that just being a catalyst, I think too many people think that COVID was a bigger crisis than it was. It's just it was overblown in the sense, in my opinion, it was overblown.
As stated by a previous president's advisor, never let any crisis go to waste.
Yes. Yeah, and that's why I say it's just a continuation of the catalyst to show how broken the culture war had become. And right now, if I had to gamble, right? If I had to gamble at all, I would say that the actual crisis is a financial one because of silent. Because of how silent kicked the can down the road, and then how they just printed money for COVID.
I saw a little statistic that said like over 50% of all money in circulation was printed in the last like 2 years.
Yeah, and here's something too, because
that's a scary thought.
Now, I think our third and fourth turnings are really convoluted, and they merge a lot. But I would say a Gen Xer created the solution to the financial crisis.
Bitcoin.
He did.
That's what
Satoshi. Satoshi created Bitcoin in response to the 2008 crisis.
My concern is that the last gasp of the silent will wind up with a central bank digital currency, and we'll all be totally effed all the way home.
It's Bitcoin, man. Bitcoin is the antithesis to the experts and the centralized bureaucracy. It is 100% the weapon against it. And the more you read this, the more it's impossible to think that the crisis won't be a massive devaluation. And that is right there. Like, bond markets are going to collapse.
Well, yeah, don't buy bonds. Holy cow.
No, but think about what asset is not going to collapse.
Energy.
What one? Well, okay, energy. But what is okay? What is Bitcoin?
Digital tech.
No, but it's the ultimate use case for energy.
When it's like digital gold, is what it is.
No, so
but it's only that way as long as people view it that way. If the culture
that's
changed,
the same thing with our dollar, man.
But if the culture changed, and people no longer wanted Bitcoin, you'd see that thing drop in value very quickly.
Okay, Chris. The key here is this: whatever your no matter what financial currency you use or system, it is a ledger of who owes what, who has so much credit to spend value-wise, right? Based on your work and fruits of your labor. It's all about keeping track of who has earned money through what they have done. So it's all just a fancy way to say, yep, I paid this person this much in exchange for this. And if he comes with this IOU, I owe him whatever in return for those notes, right? So Bitcoin is just a more effective way to do that. So it's not going to lose its value just overnight unless everybody converts it to a different system that is better at maintaining and storing what you're owed, what your property worth is, right? So it's It's a timeless property rights technology that can't be devalued by government printing and just wealth taxing you through inflation.
All right. Well, we need to get moving on the book and what we're going to rate it, and then maybe answer a couple questions.
Well, one thing about the book that we should talk about is when you look at the solutions they proposed, is there one that we did?
Well, no, the silent didn't yield.
No. This isn't it. This isn't the portion. This is the script.
Oh.
There's a later portion about the how do you prepare, and let me find it. Yeah. All right. So I'll just give you the titles.
Okay. I've got it right here.
You got it. Okay.
Yeah. How you should prepare. The first one says rectify, return to classic virtues.
Nope.
Didn't happen. Heed emerging community norms.
Nope.
Build personal relationships. We did do that. I've
Kind
built a
of.
lot of personal relationships personally, but prepare yourself and your children for teamwork. I mean, I don't know if that's like the grand general scheme, but that's something I've.
Well, are you on the personal ones? You're on the personal ones. You're not on the government ones.
Okay. Well, it says look to your family for support. Yeah. Okay. So this is a personal one.
There's one about how America.
Oh, how
should
you
prepare.
should prepare. Okay.
Yeah, you're on how you should prepare. There's how America. Well, we can.
How
do
America
both,
should
but-
prepare. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
So you say, okay, prepare, forge consensus of culture. Nope, that didn't happen.
Nope.
Prepare institutions. Nope.
Clear the.
They've been
yeah.
building everything bigger and bigger and bigger with no end in sight. Prepare politics. Define challenges bluntly. Nope. We fight over the pettiest stupid shit.
Define challenges bluntly and stress duties over rights, but don't attempt reforms that can't now be accomplished.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, it's a thing where everyone's entitled. There's nothing about your duty.
Yeah.
So no, we did not do that. Prepare society. Require community teamwork to solve local problems, but don't try this on a national scale. Absolutely did not happen.
Nope.
Not at all.
Treat children as the highest priority. They kind of did do that, but they did do the work for them quite a bit.
But yeah, you've missed the second part. Don't do their work for them. Bullshit. They did the work for them. They
Prepare
were
elders. Tell future elders they will need to be more self-sufficient. Nope, that didn't happen.
But don't attempt deep cuts in benefits to current elders. So basically, the compromise everyone claims they could have agreed on, but no, they would never do it because boomers made a pact with Silent to maintain the benefits for their selves. Okay.
To the
prepare
of their children.
Yeah, prepare the economy, correct fundamentals, but don't try to fine-tune current performance.
Nope.
Yeah,
didn't
nope.
do that either.
No, they've messed with it. Well, if you go back, those two right there, these two bullet points about prepare elders and prepare the economy are tied together perfectly. They never prepared elders. They expanded Medicaid and Medicare and all that to include, the little blue pill and stuff. Remember under Bush in the early thousands, they expanded benefits to seniors. And
are you suggesting that Medicare covers Viagra?
I'm pretty sure it did. And
I wanted to make sure I understood what you were saying.
Oh yeah. And then they have wait. And then when we get to 2008, you didn't do shit to prepare them. You expanded everything. And boomers are like, "Oh crap. We're not prepared. So let's partner with Silent Generation over here to print money and not deal with the issue. Don't make any cuts during the financial crisis."
I understand. All right. Prepare defense. Expect the worst. Prepare to mobilize. Don't pre-commit to any response. They pretty much pre-committed to every response possible.
They did. You get your little red line out and all sorts of crap. Yeah.
All right. So this is what you can do as an individual. So rectify, return to classic virtues. Some people did. Some people didn't. Most people didn't.
Let's be honest. 75% of the population probably has not, or has not admitted that they have. So,
converge, heed emerging community norms. Nope, nobody did that. Build I do think this one people have done. A lot of people have.
The internet has created a lot of small communities.
It really there's a lot of personal bonds.
Yeah.
The only problem is you want local personal bonds, and I don't know how many people have those, but.
Local has been suffering a lot, but that's also because people have been convinced to move around a lot and be far from family.
prepare yourself and your children. I think in the bulk of cases, people have been preparing their children, maybe not in the right ways, but
A
most
lot of
people have prepared
families
their children
have
for
been
something.
divided.
Look for family support. This is lacking significantly. There's a family's been destroyed by a lot of things that have changed over the years. Brace, gird for the weakening or collapse of public support mechanisms. Nobody's doing that. Like,
No.
the bulk of people were begging for a handout during the
Most
first
people
phase of the financial bailouts of COVID. So,
well, yeah.
hedge, diversify everything you do. Nope. Well, I guess there's a lot of what you call side hustles.
Does the internet count? I don't think it counts.
I don't know.
Would you count us doing this podcast as diversifying everything we do? We're
Only
doing
if
this
we
kind of
actually
for
make
fun.
money.
Yeah, but we're doing this more for fun.
So, yeah, I don't know.
It's
what would you rank this book on a scale of 1 to 5?
I want to give it a 5, even with the issues that we've identified, because they couldn't have predicted everything. But damn,
I mean, they did give like pretty much every crisis that wound up happening was listed in this book.
Oh, I mean, they predicted every potential crisis.
They predicted an attack in state, you know, in they predicted the terror. Let's 9/11. They pretty much have 9/11 in there. They have a pathogen in there. They have endless wars in there. Everything that happened is in this book. But how it happened, when it happened, and whether or not the crisis occurred during that, well, they didn't quite nail that one.
I think
I'd give it a 4.5 because there's no way I could have made these predictions.
Okay, I want to give it a 5 because despite what they have wrong, it's not that they didn't have the ingredients to come up with the right predictions per se, because they listed the traits, right? They nailed the generational traits perfectly. They just couldn't anticipate silent being, like what the silence impact would be if they were lingerers, right? But they did say that they hedged their bets by saying if you get too much of any one generation, it could have dire consequences, huge impact. So they acknowledged that it was possible. They just had no idea how they could predict that outcome. So I want to, and also the internet, I don't think they could have. So
they did predict the unification of services and media and conversation. They did predict that accurately. That was something that would have been hard to predict, I think, guessing the unification of services and the way we communicate. But overall, I'm going to give it, I guess I'll give it a 5 because we don't get 4.5s. I think there's just so many factors that would be very hard to predict in a, I don't know, post capitalistic
I think it's about the lessons learned, Chris. I think you gotta look at it from, is this book valuable perspective wise?
I think a lot of people should read this book.
Yeah, I mean, is this book really valuable as a read when it comes to like expanding how you view society and the ills that kind of exist when you have that, oh, well, we've lost a full generation now in the cycle, so no one has a memory of what happened last time.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Do you want to do some of those questions real quick?
Oh, we already answered answered the. So one of the questions was, who are the gray champions or the are probably of the boomers, and we already kind of answered that with like, you know, some examples of potentials like Bernie Sanders, RFK Jr., Trump, potentially Ron Paul, even though he's the wrong generation for it. There's a lot of, I think with the internet, the opportunity exists for lots of people to be great champions, because in the past, the great champion was somebody who called out the societal norms of his own generation and the generations younger than him. And because it was such a popular opinion, people rallied around it and it got widespread news. Like, think of the person who stood up during the revolution and was the great champion during that. Like, that was a catalyst. So there's a lot of people that could fit that narrative in modern day. So
I think Gen X needs to get more active. That's my because boomers right now, man.
The other thing they said was no more heroes, pointless elder, dumb you know whats, and I was raised by the janitor might explain some things. All right, good for you. Okay. Anyways, I think the book's great. It really lays out their theory, and whether you agree with it or not, it's well documented how they came to their opinions and how they came to their historical approach to it. And I think anybody with an interest in politics or culture should read this.
Yeah, I mean, it explains why you should not just make policies that are not timeless. Don't make anything too dramatically big. Don't be hubristic, right, in how you design your government programs in the future. And if you're an individual who reads this, you might maybe come to appreciate what the actions you can do in the back of this book are. Because, I mean, first of all, the way this society's gone, get in shape, please. Just combat that obesity issue where, you know, the vast majority of millennials probably wouldn't qualify for active duty if they had to serve. So, but other than that, I'm good. I'm good. At 5 out of 5, recommend.
Yeah, since I'm not doing a 4.5, we'll round up to a 5 as well.
Yeah,
definitely read it. And just to remind people, one last thing. In about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, we're going to be covering the new book by Neil Howe, Fourth Turning is Here. And
the 26th, right?
26th. July 26th, we'll be covering The Fourth Turning is Here, which means we'll be reading it in a very shortened time frame of about 10 days or less. But, you know, we'll see how it goes. Anyways, as always, I'm Chris.
And I'm Andrew.
And we'll see you all on the
next Printed and Pressed.
Or Krillcast, whichever comes first.
Well, next week isn't next week? Narnia, the Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
There you go. You said it right.
Yes.
All right. We'll see you guys then.
Bye, guys.